Greetings and salutations, YouTube land. Welcome to episode 2 of Jay Fixes Stuff, where it's all about small engine repair, bad decisions, and self-deprecation. So if you tuned in for episode 1, you saw us working on the Generac XG10000E. Not gonna lie, it was a little bit of a train wreck. First attempt at a video, so it was a little rough. I think you spent probably about half the video looking at the back of my neck and my back. So we've invested a little bit in some equipment, some additional stuff to make it a little easier to see, and coming up soon, we're gonna work on the audio. So until then, bear with me. Today, I have something fun lined up for you. I'm about to go meet somebody to pick up a new piece of equipment that should be a fun project. Although the projects really are stacking up. As a matter of fact, right here, follow me over here. These are coming up soon. They're stacking up though. I have like 6 or 7 mowers to work on, 4 or 5 different generators. So I really shouldn't be picking up new projects for us to start, but I say we go take a field trip. What do you say? Come on, let's go. Damn speed bumps. All right, so what you're looking at here is the Echo PB-770T. This is currently for sale in stores right now for $599 plus tax. It is an awesome blower, but the seller complains that it starts up, but then it dies out and it will not stay running. So I talked him all the way down to $80, basically stole this blower. So if we can get this up and running, this may even become my new personal blower. So let's try to validate what he said, see if it does in fact start up. I did not even bother starting it there because I didn't want him to change his mind about the $80. So let's go ahead and see if we can fire this thing up. First, we'll turn on the power right over here. We will pump the primer bulb right here. It's actually a purge bulb. Gets the air out of the circuit, and then we turn on the choke. So let's give it a few pulls and see what happens. that was actually a really good test. That engine sounded absolutely amazing. It had a ridiculous amount of power, and we were able to reproduce the problem. So everything is looking really good at this point. Now, for the last part of the test, I want to see if this thing will start right back up again or not, and that'll help us narrow things down a little bit. Let's turn down the throttle a little bit. Interesting. All right, let's try one other thing before we bring this sick blower back into the shop. Let's see if we're able to run it on an inline spark tester, just to see if we can visually see if we're losing spark or not. Sometimes these add too much resistance for them to run, so it might not work, but if it does, it'd be cool. So let's see if we can visually see this or not. Let's try that. And I'll just give you a quick rundown on these two blowers. They're actually really not that different, even though they are in appearance completely different. So the PB-750 is the granddaddy of the PB-770. They have the exact same engine. They both have the 63.3 cc's. However, interestingly enough, the 770 is able to put out 234 miles per hour at the nozzle, whereas the PB-750 can only put out 208 miles per hour at the tip. So the design was changed quite a bit. So even though they're both using a 63.3 cc engine, the amount of air they can move because of how they changed the fan, the older one, the 750 on your right, puts out 551 CFM. The new one, the 770, puts out 756 CFM. So it does change it from 208 miles per hour to 234 miles per hour. And the sound rating did not actually go up that much. The noise, it went from 71 decibels at 50 feet to 73 decibels. So it's actually still relatively quiet for such a powerful blower. And that's pretty much it. The other thing is they were able to shave off some of the weight, although the fuel tank slightly went up. So it went from a dry weight of 24.9 pounds on the one on the right down to 21.6 pounds on the left. And both are basically 2-liter tanks, but the one on the right is 67.7 fluid ounces and the one on the left is 68.3 fluid ounces. So the one on my right is actually a blower that I personally made out of 3 different blowers. I had 2 seized blowers, and then I had one that had a broken off handle. So I transplanted the engine from the PB-750H over to the PB-770T to utilize that handle and that throttle mechanism. And then I was able to use some of the parts off of another seized PB-650 to make it complete. And it really is powerful, and it's my primary blower. I love it. Even though I've had some really powerful blowers this year. I've had a Redmax 8550, PB580. They've been great, but I actually love this one the best. So if we're able to make the 770 perfect, whole, and complete, and it outperforms the 750, that one might become my new personal blower. So let me just go fire this thing up. It hasn't run in a few weeks, but I bet it'll still fire right up. So same deal, this one has a power switch, whereas the other one is integrated into the actual throttle. So turn the power on, put the choke on, we'll purge the air out of the circuit. Let's see how many pulls it takes. Second pull. That's going to be hard to beat. That thing is a beast. I really do love it. So without further ado, let's get this sick blower into the shop. All right, welcome back to the shop. So I just went through a big, long kind of explanation of things that could possibly cause this run condition, only to realize that there were sirens going in the background, a neighbor was using a leaf blower, and you just couldn't hear me terribly well. So I figured might as well come back inside here and I'll try to summarize the big long spiel I just went through. So when you run into things like this, often it can be caused by a clogged spark arrestor over here on the exhaust, and that is a possibility. It wasn't on the top of my list though, because it took quite a while for it to happen. And then after it shut down, I didn't hear like a little hissing noise by the exhaust. So it's a possibility and we'll look into it, but I don't think it's the prime suspect. Another possibility is the fuel filter. If it gets partially clogged or clogged, it can start off giving a decent amount of fuel and then taper down, and then it can act like it's starving for fuel like it was. You also have the fuel lines, and in this case, on this specific machine, Echo remanufactured this completely enclosing the carb, so you can't get to it. So on the positive side, this thing could take quite a bit of beating and not damage anything, but it makes it a whole lot harder to get to anything. And Echo knew that, so they actually put in a standalone purge bulb right here. This is not part of the carburetor. It's a whole separate standalone unit. So you have lines coming in and out of this that also have more of an opportunity to have an air leak. However, I'm also not thinking that's it, because it pumps up really well and it's staying full of fuel. So we'll check out those lines, but that's also not a prime suspect. The next thing to think about is air filter. However, when the air filter is clogged, usually it'll start running poorly right from the beginning if it's starving for air. In this case, we seem more like we're starving for fuel or losing spark. So that's unlikely. And the next thing to think about would be a tank vent. Down here you have a grommet, and out of it you have the tank vent. So it is possible that the tank vent could be stopping air from getting in, but if that is the case, oh, maybe it is. I just heard a hiss when I opened that up. All right, so we'll definitely swap out that tank vent as well. So these are some of the things that you think about when you are trying to chase down a run condition like we're running into. And the last thing is the coil. You really couldn't see it. I tried putting the inline El Cheapo Chinese spark tester so you could see while it was running if it was losing spark. And in the video, I just watched that clip real quick, and you really couldn't see any spark at all. But when it was bogging down and acting dumb, the spark was actually cutting out as well. So I think we actually have a number of things going on. That being said, this ran really well and it fired right up. So I was pretty impressed. I think we actually have a really good machine here, but I think we're gonna need to service it. So I'm gonna go through some things here that will be useful for anybody who owns one of these or plans to service one. And let's tear it down, see what we're looking at. All right, so Echo decided that they were going to copy steel, which is absolutely awesome. So as a result, you can now service this entire thing with one tool. All you need is a T27 Torx tool. Let me grab one of those to show it to you. That's it. That's all you need. This one little thing. All right, so there is an order that you want to do this in, and we're going to start off over here with the air filter housing. In the first video, I was unfortunately blocking your view of what was going on throughout most of the video. So I am going to be more cognizant of that. Also, I said the word actually no less than 4 or 5 million times. So I'm going to attempt to cut down on the use of the word actually. All right, this is incorrect. So a couple things here. Let me just check on the camera and see how we're doing. All right, I'm going to move you over a little bit. All right, so we're back. I think you can see a little bit better now. I just wanted to show you this. This is incorrect. This was not put back together correctly. So what we have here, we have a few different pieces. This is the pre-filter. This is the air filter, which is actually in really nice condition. It appears like it's likely aftermarket, and it also appears as though it's never seen a single hour of use. So we can probably reuse that as long as it fits well. And yes, it does fit well. So even though it's aftermarket, we can reuse that. All right, so here's the way that it's supposed to be. A lot of times when homeowners take these apart, they will put the pre-filter in, then they'll put this filter in and think that it goes like that. It does not. This pre-filter is not supposed to be in there. So the pre-filter is actually supposed to be inside here. So you take this, put it like that. That's where the pre-filter goes. The air filter goes in like that. So then we put this like that, and then we put this like that. That's the proper way to reassemble that, because you want that pre-filter putting pressure up against that to hold it in place. All right, I'm also spotting something else that is not correct. We are missing a piece. However, I'm starting to think that the tech that worked on this last is my kind of guy, because I don't like the missing piece either. So let me show you. Here, looking down, you can see the top of the carburetor. That is not supposed to be. This is actually the way that I prefer it, but it's missing a piece. So let me pause you real quick, and I'm going to go into my horrible drawer of parts, and I think I might actually have a spare to show you. So I'll be right back. And we're back. That took entirely too long to locate that little part. This is what it looks like. And really it serves no purpose aside from keeping junk off of the top of the carburetor. And I'll actually show you that it still is kind of gunked up. Granted, if the cap were there, it might not have caused that problem. But this serves no purpose other than to limit access to the low-speed needle. So, all right, let me throw this over here. So let's get started on tearing this thing apart. I'm going to show you the order in which to do it. And the shop is still completely destroyed from all the projects that I've had. I have not actually had a chance to clean it since the last video that I made, where it was already pretty messed up. So basically, the first step is taking off the air filter housing, which we've already done. The second step is going to be to take this part of the housing off, leaving this part, and then that part comes as the last part along with the carburetor. So let's just zip the part off here. Oh, and there's only two different types of bolts that are used, technically screws, I guess. You have this kind here, it's kind of a raised one, and then you have the rounded, sort of lower profile ones. So you want to keep track of where they came from. This right here, they're only used to secure the recoil, and then you'll notice there's one down below the purge bulb, and then around the recoil. Those are the only places where you'll actually see that. All the rest are the rounded head ones. So just maybe take a picture before you take it apart so you can put everything back together in the way that you found it. Alright, so we have those done, and then now we just want to get the other similar ones out of the way next. And it is odd that the one above the purge bulb is the normal rounded one and the bottom one is that style. Verify that's all of those. And yep, it is. So the remaining ones are all going to be the rounded head ones. And let me just tilt you up a little bit here. Oh, okay. Alright. And we're free. Now the shroud is off. Okay, so as you can see, we have access to almost everything at this point. Let's just quickly go through where everything is. Down here, you have your grommet with the lines, the fuel lines going into it. You have the one pulling the fuel up, you have your returning the fuel down from the purge, and then you have our tank vent that we are going to be replacing. In fact, if I have everything I need, I believe I can actually replace all of that. Also, these have kind of a connector on the bottom that tends to at a point where the lines can wear. So I think we might actually replace that with just a traditional straight through fuel line. All right, over here we have our exhaust, which is in really nice shape. There's like not a speck of rust on it, which is really unusual. Down here we have access to the spark arrestor screen. You have your trough here. You want to make sure that this is actually straight out. If this gets bent, it's common for these, especially when they're used for landscapers and yard guys. These troughs often get bent, and if they're bent down, like they often get, they'll actually melt the plastic shroud because it's kicking out all the heat through this one opening right here. So you want to make sure that that's perpendicular to the exhaust. So we're going to pop that off in a little bit and check out the spark arrestor screen. Although now that I'm seeing the shape of this exhaust, I would be surprised if we have a clog there. Up here is our spark plug. Externally, at least, it actually looks like it's in really good shape. We'll check that in just a moment. Here we have our coil, and I have a feeling that we're probably going to end up replacing that because I was seeing a loss of spark when it was acting stupid. Then over here, this is what I was telling you about with the purge bulb. You want to inspect this and make sure there's no cracks and make sure there's no leak of any kind. If you see any sign here that there's any liquid, or if it's not filling up with fuel when you pump it, then you want to replace this. And rather than replacing just the plastic dome piece here like you do with most of them, this whole unit. You can get them really cheap for just a couple of dollars at your dealer. And actually I think I have one of those as well, but I don't think I'm going to replace it. I'm probably just going to replace these lines. But this was, I was showing you before, how you have the lines coming in and out of here. So you're adding more points of failure for air to get in. All right, up here you have your carburetor. This one, for the throttle cable, I'm not in love with it. It has to go over this reel here. There's like a kind of a rubber reel. And if it's not seated perfectly in a little groove, I'll just quickly zoom in a little bit for you. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it from here. Probably not. All right, and here you can actually see the reel that I was talking about that it has to go over. It hooks in like a normal throttle cable right there on that connector, and you can see the rest of the carburetor below. That right there is actually the low adjuster for the carburetor, right through the little round spot right there. This does take the special Echo carburetor adjustment tool. It's usually called well, they have like 4 different names for it, but basically it's called either a small D, a single D, a micro D. You'll hear it referred to as a whole bunch of different things. On this one, if you can get what they call the long D, that's really what you want. You want the tiny little D that you're able to get through the outer shroud. And I really probably should have shown you that before, but let's just show you real quick. This right here, when it's in place, the carburetor, you can't get to anything. And as you can see, there's a big space between that shroud and the carburetor. So right here, you'll notice that tiny little hole right there. That's actually your high-speed adjustment. That's your low up there. So you actually need a special tool to get to it, and then you need to make sure that it's long enough because it has to get all the way into the carb through there and then through that gap through the outer part of the shroud. All right, from this position you can see the air filter housing, and you can see where the carburetor and the choke handle, how it actuates right there. So in order to take the carburetor off, all you're doing is taking those 2 out, and that frees the base of the airbox. Well, once you get the 2 remaining parts here, there's a couple that go into the fan housing as well. But as far as the carburetor itself, once you have those 2 things off, these will take the actual carburetor right out. All right, let's start going through some things. First, we'll start off with the spark arrestor on the exhaust, and we're also going to check the spark plug and see what we're looking at. These fasteners really aren't in bad shape. For the exhaust, they're constantly expanding, contracting, subjected to all kinds of heat, and they're usually pretty crusty. And these really aren't that bad. I mean, it's a fairly new blower apparently, but all right. So that's our outer part. That's our gasket. And then once we pop that off, we have access to the shield right behind it. And I can already see from where we are right now, it's really not that bad. But we're still going to clean it out. Try not to destroy that gasket. There we go. And yeah, it's pretty clean in there as well. Very little carbon. All right, I'll just hold up the spark arrestor screen, and you can see there's almost nothing there. So our problem is not the spark arrestor. So I'll just show you real quick how to clean that out, if you'll bear with me for a moment. All right, so what you want to do when you do have carbon on here, there's lots of different ways to get it off. The easiest way that most people do is simply take a propane or a map torch to it. Just heat it up red, and any carbon will come right off of there. All right, and as you can see, we're nice and clean, but really we were clean before. All right, so while we're waiting for that spark arrest to cool off, let's go ahead and check out the plug and see what we're working with here. All right, this is actually a steel tool, which would work perfectly for this because you have your T27 down there on this end, and then you have your spark plug tool on this end. So this is for steel, but it works awesome for this, of course. Yeah, we look fine. Maybe like it's been running slightly lean. Just make sure you can see that here. The gap also doesn't look bad. I have the specs for this, but I want to say it is 24 1/1000ths. Some people prefer 26, but I want to say this one's supposed to run at 24. So let's see what we have here. Yeah, slightly tight, but not bad. So I'm just gonna make sure that's, yeah, we're good at 24. Right, let's look inside. Yeah, it looks really good. Now, since we have access to this thing, let's just take a peek. It was running beautifully, so we should not have any damage to the actual cylinder or the piston, but since we have access to the exhaust, let's just pop it off and take a look at the side of the piston and make sure we're looking good. All right, let's see if that actually broke this time. Yep. Hopefully it didn't break off the bolt, because that was pretty rough. Anytime you're dealing with the exhaust ones that get hot, they are really difficult to get out. And this is no different. All right, we are free. And technically, we don't need to take this all the way off, just so that we can get a view here. But I'm going to try to get the camera in here for you. All right, welcome back. So this is going to be shaky. Unfortunately, I have to hold this by hand in order to get you in here tight. So this is an excellent way to check the health of your engine, of the top end. All you have to do is pop off the exhaust like we just did, and then you're able to manually operate the piston, moving it up and down by the recoil part there, turning the crankshaft. So if you watch, you'll see the piston come up, and as you can see, it is flawless. There is no scoring, no marks. The rings look good, no problems whatsoever. So this is a very healthy engine. And I'm back. Okay, so I just did a double take when I was pulling this plug out because it didn't look right. The form factor's right, but the number looked wrong. So I took a little closer look at it, and I don't know if you can see that. It is a BPM R7A. I guess you can't see that. I don't know why the camera isn't focusing on that, but there we go. Yeah, that's not correct. That's not what goes in this. This is what's supposed to be in there. It is a BPM 8Y. So yeah, let's get the correct plug in. All right, just gonna gap the plug real quick. And I did confirm just now that it's actually 24 thousandths. Okay. Alright. Feels good. Alright, plug wire's back on. Actually, you know what? We're going to replace that. So, and I believe I actually have a coil in stock. So, turns out I do have a coil that's compatible for this in stock. And as I was looking at this, I noticed that I had forgotten the heat shield here, so I threw that back on. Alright, so let's get the old coil out. You have just like a little bushing here, and the outer part, it holds your kill wire, and
inner part holds the plug wire. So just set it there, and we'll get this off. Alright, plug the kill wire we'll put up here. And you want to check the orientation before you bring it out. Actually, you probably shouldn't use an impact on something like this either. But you want the kill prong on that side and your plug on that side. It's not hard to flip it around on coils, unfortunately. Alright, let's pull these out. Okay. Alright, started on, and the rest of the way out. Alright, and we'll just pull it out like that. And now we'll get this one in its place. So first we want to grab the little grommet here. And actually, let's get it in place first before we do that. Just get it started. Now, with most coils, the gap is supposed to be roughly 10 thousandths, and usually that is just like a standard business card. With Echo, it's a little different rather. They don't want you doing 10 thousandths. They want you doing 14 thousandths. In fact, they actually have a part for it. So as you can see here, it is Echo part number 91004, and essentially it's a laminated business card. So don't waste your money, just use like a feeler gauge on both sides, or you can use a really thick business card instead of a standard one, or you can just use a business card like most people do. But you're supposed to use this. I'm just rotating it here. Alright, and the magnets are right there. Okay, and they're in place. I'm just going to use this to get them a little closer in. We'll finish them by hand. This tool's getting a lot of action today, even though it's not supposed to be for Echoes. Just make contact with both sides and go back and finish tightening them down firmly. And again, I don't know what the torque specs are for this. Don't do what I do. Pull out the torque wrench, do it correctly. Alright, so let's rotate it and see if we have good clearance here or not. Alright, no contact, and yeah, gap physically looks correct. And we have no dragging, so we're very good. Right at the top dead center right there. Alright, let's finish getting it plugged in. Put this in through there. Like so. And this kill wire can go through right there. Alright, grommet is back in. Everything feels good, nothing's getting pinched. This is just to prevent this from wearing on anything. Just like that's basically what this is when it has the shroud. Although really, these are primarily when they're going up through the top of a shroud, and this one doesn't do that. It stays below the shroud, so it's not really an issue for this. But anyway, we will reconnect that There we go. Now we're good. That feels good. Nice contact. Plug the kill wire back in. Make sure you have good connection. And yeah, feels good. All right, 2 things down. We have the spark arrestor cleaned, even though it didn't need to be. We have replaced the coil. We've replaced this with the correct NGK plug. And now let's move on over to the fuel side of things. And you can actually test these using a multimeter and putting it on ohms for resistance. And you can test the resistance to the primary and the secondary. But honestly, I have run into multiple coils where they tested well for resistance, but they still were not performing their job of the electronic ignition correctly. So sometimes it's faster and easier just to swap out the part if you already have one in stock. All right, so let's get this the rest of the way off. We have one more of those down here, the T29. At the bottom. And there should be one more. Oh, I already took it off. That one, you're kind of supposed to leave it on there, but this one right here at the top, usually I leave that on till the end. So that one and the bottom one are what hold this actual housing, the base plate on there. So, all right, next, I'm gonna rotate this and see if you can see it any better. Lift table's getting a little crowded now. Okay. So these are the 2 that you need to remove to get the carb out. Make sure you can see this, and you can. I'm gonna add a little more though. Okay. So over here, this is the way that it sits. You have those 2 that go through this gasket into that intake, and it's a flexi intake too. So you don't usually see them like that. So you want to inspect that. It's like a rubber boot basically, and you want to inspect that and make sure that there's no visible cracks. And it looks good. And this gasket also looks good. There's no problems with it. Feels good. There's no cracks. So these are possible places where you could have air leaks. But I don't believe it's an air leak because I think you would run like crap right from the beginning, not develop a problem running once it's been running for a while. So this is the choke plate cover. We'll take that off, leave it right here for now. And this is the rest of the airbox base right here. All right. This is the throttle cable that I was telling you about before. This is the idle adjustment, and it's for your average homeowner. It is the only thing they can adjust on the carburetor because they don't have the special Echo tool that I was telling you about before. And again, that is the high speed adjustment. That's the low speed adjustment right there. So I want to say I have an actual carb in stock for this if we end up needing one, but it's an aftermarket one, and this is an OEM one. So there's really, at this point, there's no reason to throw this Walbro away and replace it with a Chinese one at this point. So this pops right out just like any other one. You just slide it down and lift it up, and then we are completely free of that part. And we have our hoses right here. There really should be a ring right here. I'm not sure why we don't have one. That's kind of strange. Huh. Anyway, this goes through the primer right here like I told you about before. And that right there goes to the bottom of the bowl. And this is factory. I don't like it. It can cause these to wear together, believe it or not, when it's actually designed to stop them from chafing and rubbing up against other things. But I've seen some of these before where it actually causes this part of the hose to wear because that edge is chafing into the hose. So like I said, I think I'm most likely going to replace just all this tubing with new tubing and go from there. So I'm going to put you on pause here a little bit while I check to see what I have available for the appropriate size tubing, and I will be right back. Okay, so I found some fuel line. I typically like to have the clear be the return line, and then the darker line, the non-see-through line, be the line that's pulling the fuel up out of the carb, just so you can quickly and easily see which one's which. However, for the non-see-through kind, I don't currently have any that'll fit through that grommet, so it looks like we're using this kind for both. So I just popped the grommet out just to inspect the filter, and yeah, I don't think it's ever been changed. So we're going to change that, and I'm just going to put you on a quick pause just to empty out this fuel here. It smells okay, but man rule, 101, never trust another man's mix. Okay, so it looks like you missed it. I had paused it to empty out what was in the tank and just to clean the mess that was underneath here, with the plans to work on the grommet and the lines next. And I did dump out what was in the tank. It initially appeared to be a regular fuel mix. However, once I started pouring it out, I got the old familiar smell of canned gas, like True Fuel. So that wasn't good. There was a tint to it though, so it looked like they may have mixed that with something else that did have regular conventional 2-cycle oil in it. So I'm glad we got that out of there. We're going to put some nice fresh mix in for testing later on. Let me just catch up with what has been going on over here that I thought was recording and clearly was not. We have the whole mess of hoses that run from the purge bulb over to the carburetor and down to the grommet that goes inside of the tank. So actually, it was probably best that you didn't have to sit through that because it's boring. Anyway, I have replaced this here. They did not have the clamps on this, and I looked it up on the parts list, and it is that way on the diagram as well. So I will make sure I did put one on this end for the filter that's going to go inside the tank, and we'll make sure that we have them on the bottom of the carb once we finish cleaning up the carburetor. So let's just finish what we have going on here. This right here is the fuel input line. I put a new filter on here, and that is going to go up through this grommet. It's going to go on the tank here, and then this will connect to the part of the carburetor where it is going straight down. So right here, and we can take that off now actually. I'm going to get the clamp off, and the hose is off. All right, so that is the inlet, and that is the return right there. This is the Walbro carburetor. It's the rotary style that rotates like so. And I haven't decided if I'm going to clean this one up or if I'm going to throw an aftermarket on it, because I do have a brand new aftermarket that I know works well on this machine. But I would like to keep it OEM. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. All right. Also, this tank vent here, I did test that with the Mighty Vac, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to. The new one, the old one was not. So we're going to be putting a new tank vent on here as well. So, matter of fact, why don't we do that now? We just need a little piece of hose so we can actually do it right with this right here. So when you have this hose, all you want to do is just cut it into kind of a point. Oops. I have to get my regular snippers. Yeah, it's a little too rubbery. All right, and so you have something like that, how it's pointy. That helps it get through the grommet. And if you throw just a little bit of oil on it, it'll also help it get through. All right, so we're going to put that in our remaining hole on the top of the grommet right here. And as you can see, being pointed helps it get down through there. And you just wiggle it back and forth. And that's pretty much it. Now you don't need this sticking up very far, just like that is about right. On a lot of these Echoes, they have like a little cup that the tank vent will kind of sit in. This blower does not have one, at least I haven't seen one. So, all right, and this one we're not going to put a clamp on because it's actually not a bad thing if you did get a little bit of air in, because that's its job, is to let air in and not let it out. Let me throw a little oil on this as well. This hose isn't ideal. It really should be a little wider gauge, but it works. I have some really heavy duty 3/16, but the outer diameter is just way too big to go through this grommet, so this is going to have to do. Okay, and now on this end of it, so that's sticking up a little higher than I like. That's about where it should be, roughly in there somewhere. And then on this end, you just want to cut it off so it's not going too far down. You don't want that to be down inside the fuel. You want it just through the top of the grommet, but not to a point where it's going to come out. Make sure I'm not cutting anything else. Perfect. All right, and that's kind of what you want it to be. Same thing with the return line. You want it sticking down maybe a little bit below the other one, but you don't need it down into the fuel. Something like that is good. All right. So let's do a quick inventory here and see what we have and what we need. This is the old yuckiness here. This is one that I was considering using. This is our previous one that's going away. Let's get that over there so we don't confuse it. All right. So once we get the carburetor ready to go back on, we're going to have this part here going to the return of the carburetor, which would be right there. And then we're going to have this part here going to the part that's going down, just like that. And then the grommet will go on the tank, and this will go inside the... Actually, we can probably do that now. Might as well just put the grommet in. All right, just put a tiny little bit of oil around the edges, just to help it get going. This, let's see, airbox faces like that, the tank goes like that. All right, actually, I'm trying to think of maybe I should put the tank back on first, but I guess we'll just do it this way. A little bit more oil on this side. And usually just get, with new grommets, it's a little hard to get them in. This one, the oil helped out, so we're good. Okay, so that's good. Now let's get this tank back in. Flip this whole thing over and get those bolts back in. Lining these up is a little awkward. Okay, all four is started. It's all aligned. I'll just zip them in. Going into plastic, so you don't want to go hard. the one that'll click usually the impact. Or several clicks. Alright, that should be enough to hold it in without ruining the plastic. Now you have a little better view of the grommet. This is our return line. This is our input line here that's going to go in the carburetor. That is our tank vent. Everything's in here. And then this will go back just like so. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go get an area set up to clean up the carb a little. I don't think we're going to do a full-blown cleaning on it. Let's go take a look. Okay, so brought you over to the workbench here, and I still haven't decided if I'm going to use this or not, or if we're going to go with the aftermarket. I guess I should probably decide that pretty soon, huh? Alright, so let me just clean the outside of this a little bit before we start messing with it. This has never been cleaned. No way. Okay. Get a little more of that loose garbage off. Mess up that rubber seal. And I don't want to mess up that needle. Alright, I think we just clean out that gunk on the top. Be able to open it up. Okay. Let's get this top part off. And actually, this is probably a good time to show you. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. This right here is the low speed adjustment needle right through the top, right down below there. Let me blow it out with a little air to see if that helps make it visible to you. Yeah, hopefully you can see right in there. I don't know if you can see it or not. Should be good enough to open it up. Alright, and this is the tool I was telling you about that I actually modified myself. This is the one for the Echo. Well, all the modern Echoes use this proprietary one that we were talking about before. So I actually had to modify it because on the 2620T string trimmer, Echo did it in such a way that you cannot get to it with a standard tool. You need to be able to go in further through a really tiny little narrow space. So I had to actually grind this down to make it reach. So it's kind of obnoxious. Let's see if we're free or not. Yep, the whole barrel should be coming up. And it is. Okay. So we want the word Walbro to be on the same side as the idle adjustment screw. Okay. Cut that off. Let's see what kind of goodies we have in here. Okay. That's clean. Oh, actually, the diaphragm's moving pretty nicely. I don't have a rebuild kit for this, so if we are going to reuse this carb, I don't want to tear it. Yeah, no issues with it at all. Alright, let's put that over here. And it's really not that dirty. And really, it was running really well until it got hot, so I'm not inclined to take that whole needle and the metering lever out. So what we're going to do is just clean it up. You're going to open it up by pressing down the lever, but we're not going to take it all the way out. There's really no reason to. I'm really not a fan of this carb cleaner. It's like 2 settings, off and fire hose. Alright, it should be noted that you're actually not supposed to use carb cleaner on 2-stroke carburetors. Manufacturers like Walbro and Zama have said that the one-way check valves are made of the same type of film material as like the little flappers that you see in many carbs, and using carb spray can actually damage them, but we small engine mechanics do it anyway. So I don't want to tear that gasket. A little hesitant to take that off. Alright. Yeah, it's a little dirty on that side. This is the pump side that has the little flappers. Whoa, that's me. That's probably. Alright, that stuff. Now we should be able to get from this side, but let's see if it'll go that way. It has to, because that's where the needle goes. Yeah, got that in the eye. All right. Alright, and that's pretty much it. So I'll just do the opposite of what we did and just throw it back together, and then we'll try out this carb and see if it works. As I was getting ready to put this back together, I realized I forgot to tell you that there's actually a little screen here, as there is on most 2-cycle carbs, and you want to make sure there's no gunk on that. So if there is any kind of gunk, then you want to just take the whole screen right out and blow it out through the opposite side. And I can't remember if we put anything through here, so we're just going to hit it real quick. But that screen is completely clear, so this carb shouldn't have had any issues running it, and I don't believe it did. So, all right, so let's just throw this thing back together real quick. Again, you want the idle adjustment screw on the side that says Walbro. These generally just really go back in one. Oops, sorry. These generally just go back in one way anyway, so you're basically just building a sandwich. So you have the main body of the carb, then you have the inner part like so with the pump side here, then you have the metering side here that goes down there. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a pretty straightforward carb. It's just a pain trying to remember on which carburetor which passageway goes where. So and these days it's usually worth tossing a carb in the trash and just buying a new one, because the rebuild kits for these are usually quite a bit more money than an aftermarket is, and most aftermarkets work pretty well these days. So most of us don't typically waste our time doing a full clean on a 2-cycle carb. Same thing with the Briggs 190cc 4 cycles. They're actually not worth trying to clean because none of it's removable on those. So, okay, so it goes like that. And then we have that like that. Okay. Put that towards the body like that. You have locator pins right there and there, so that you know you're getting it in the right direction. Like I said, you can't really mess it up. It's just for a moment you have to question yourself, or just throw it, whichever. Okay, so that goes like that, like so. And this is the metering side. If you do a full carb clean on these and you decide to take all this out and clean that passageway, we didn't because it's already clean, but if you had a run condition you were trying to fix, you would hold this down while you loosen that screw, because there's actually a spring underneath there that will shoot the whole thing, you know, across the shop, never to be seen again. So, okay. So you want this metal side towards the body of the carb. And there's locator pins here. Actually, I might have that backwards. This might go like that. Yep, it does. Okay. Like I said, you can't really screw it up because they set it up so there's locator pins. Okay. And if I remember correctly, that was that way. Like that. Yep, like that. And then we have our 4 remaining screws that go through. Okay, take this down. I even have the ultrasonic ready in case we need to use that today, but this carb was not bad at all. It really didn't need to go through the ultrasonic. And you want to make sure these are snug down well so you don't have an air leak here. All right, let's throw it back on the machine. All right, so let's get this thing back together so we can get it outside and test it and see if we fixed everything. Okay, so the carburetor is clean now. It wasn't that dirty to begin with, but now we know it's clean. All right, so we already went over how all the hoses go. I just slapped those back on, made sure we had our clamps at the top so that we're not having any air leaks. And we're going to line this whole thing up, but before we do that, we have to get the throttle cable back in and then make sure that it's on the little roller thing we talked about over here. So hopefully you can see all that. On this part here that anchors the throttle cable, one end has a big hole, the other side does not. So you want to have it terminate through the side that has the big hole on the end of it, like that. And we're going to put that around that roller, underneath that plastic guide. There we go, that's better. There we go. Okay. So now we need to put the pins through the choke cover plate, through the airbox, through the carburetor, through the gasket, into the intake. As the carburetor is falling. Okay. Line up the screws with the gasket, or bolts, whatever you want to call them. Get them started. Alright. That is started, so just get a little closer here. Alright, once you get close, and we're going to use this handy dandy tool again. Snug it the rest of the way down. Don't want to go crazy, just make sure you don't have any air leaks. Alright, then you're going to double check on the throttle cable to make sure that it does not have a lot of play, but it's not too tight. Alright, so we have those two screws, or two spots I told you about before. There's that right there. Again, you're going into plastic, so you don't need to go crazy. And way down on the bottom. There we go. Now it's properly supported. Let's try that trigger again. Alright, throttle trigger feels good. I just wanted to double check and make sure. Alright, so let's get this shroud back on and we'll get it outside to give it a little bit of a test. Alright, let's do a quick visual check here. Ground wire's on, plug is on, all this is on, no spare parts hanging around. Really, we can get this back in here. There we go. A lot of people leave this flapping, and I just don't like it. Alright, so that's there. And if this runs well, I think I'm actually going to order up some new plastics for it to make it look even nicer than it already does. Alright, we are almost back together. And remember, these, you want that pre-filter on the outside of the frame. So like that. Like that, and then that goes in there. Yeah, I'm going to order up a new plastic for this if this runs nicely. There we go. Fill the tank about half up. All right. All right, now let's test and make sure that what we did with the carb, and the purge bulb worked. All right, very nice. Everything's working as it should. All right, it has gotten dark outside, so we are using the work lights out here. But let's give this thing a try, see how it's gonna run. We'll let it run for a while, assuming it starts, and see if the problem is gone and if we fixed it. All right, choke is on. It is primed. Let's give it a pull. Warm up for a sec, and then we'll put it up to wide open throttle and see how she does. Outstanding. All right, so we fixed it. I believe the primary issue was the bad vent for the tank, but also the coil was also acting flaky. So it is working well now. I'm going to go ahead and order up some nice plastics and make this thing look pretty. And I believe this is going to be my primary blower from now on. So I want to thank everybody for stopping by, all 2 or 3 of you who happen to watch the video. And my dog is now making a cameo appearance. So yeah, thanks for stopping by and have a great night.